For millennia, human societies have attempted to cheat time through mass and density. We carve and stack dense materials, granite, marble, and bronze, into rigid vertical forms that resist the weather and outlast the generations who built them. By lifting a single figure or historical symbol high above our sightlines on a pedestal, the builders achieve what Lewis Mumford called petrified immortality. The state literally sets its memory in stone, presenting one sanitized, heroic narrative that demands passive admiration from anyone walking below. But Mumford recognized a flaw in this design. Because stone is static, it offers a deceptive assurance of life. It imposes a false continuity on history, freezing an event or a person in a permanent state of triumph while the culture around it inevitably evolves, debates, and fragments. Because of their rigid certainty, these vertical forms became the favored tools of 20th century authoritarian regimes. Gigantic, unyielding statues proved highly efficient at visually subjugating the masses, using sheer scale and didactic design to instruct citizens on exactly who to revere and what history to believe. Yet the supposed permanence of these monuments is entirely dependent on the complicity of the public. When the Soviet Union collapsed, crowds tore down the state's massive bronze icons, snapping a cable around a dictator's neck and dragging the metal through the dust. The material survived, but the power of the object dissolved the moment the public withdrew its consent. The traditional monument, then, is highly fragile. It attempts to displace the messy, contentious reality of human memory with a single, unmovable illusion. By the mid-20th century, the sheer scale of global warfare and mass murder completely broke the traditional architectural vocabulary. Millions of lives were eradicated, leaving behind decimated cities and entire populations wiped from the map. Post-war Germany faced the uniquely paralyzing problem. The nation had to figure out how to officially mourn the millions of Jews murdered in the Holocaust, a catastrophic crime perpetrated in the nation's own name. Constructing a traditional, upward-thrusting monument for this event would require finding an aesthetic beauty or a heroic lesson in mass murder. To the artists and architects tasked with the design, utilizing the didactic, towering forms favored by the fascist regime would mean extending the very aesthetic that had facilitated the genocide. Planners realized they had to abandon the redemptive pedestal entirely. To accurately commemorate a deep, unhealable breach in civilization, they needed a visual language built on absence. In 1982, designer Maya Lin introduced a model that severely challenged vertical heroism. Her design for the Vietnam Veterans Memorial replaced the white neoclassical obelisks of the Capitol with a sloping V shape of highly polished black granite. Rather than building an object that protruded into the sky, Lin designed a negative space. She envisioned taking a knife to slice open the earth, creating an initial wound that would eventually heal over, leaving a permanent, dark scar embedded in the terrain. To read the names of the dead, visitors must physically walk down an incline. This perambulation, the physical act of moving downward into the earth, strips away the passive observation of a traditional statue and forces the visitor into an active, intimate engagement with the sheer volume of the loss. This concept evolved into what theorists call the countermonument. These are structures engineered specifically to resist the consoling, permanent, and didactic traits of classical architecture. In Hamburg, Germany, artists Esther and Jochen Gers pushed this theory to its extreme. They erected a lead-covered pillar dedicated to the victims of fascism. As citizens engraved their names onto the soft metal, the pillar was gradually lowered into an underground chamber, until it disappeared completely beneath the cobblestones. By vanishing, the pillar refuses to carry the weight of history for the city. It throws the responsibility back onto the passing pedestrians, demanding that the public perform the active labor of remembering. As the counter-monument evolved, architects began weaponizing the physical concept of the void, sculpting nothingness itself into a primary building material. When Daniel Libeskind designed the Jewish Museum in Berlin, he built an exterior wrapped in zinc and sliced by aggressively acute, chaotic angles. The building actively resists classical harmony, hinting at the fractured history contained inside. Inside, Libeskind sliced stark, empty concrete shafts straight through the intersecting floor plans. These are the voids, unheated, unlit spaces that interrupt the museum's galleries. They ensure that the absence of Berlin's murdered Jewish population is felt by the visitor as a heavy physical obstruction. This concept was famously observed by the ancient philosopher Lao Tzu. While we join spokes to form a wheel, the empty center allows movement. Libeskind applied this logic to trauma. The walls merely give shape to the emptiness. The architecture organizes around the void, allowing non-being to hold the emotional weight. You cannot replace what has been completely eradicated. Deliberate physical emptiness communicates the scale of irredeemable tragedy with a precision that bronze and marble simply cannot achieve. The principles of the counter-monument and the void eventually moved beyond individual installations, scaling up to occupy massive footprints at the centers of modern cities. The Berlin Denkmal, designed by Peter Eisenman to memorialize the murdered Jews of Europe, occupies 5 acres of the capital. It consists of 2,711 concrete stelae arranged on an uneven slope. There is no central plaza, no focal point, and no single vantage point from which to view the whole installation, intentionally disorienting anyone who wanders through the grid. But the abstraction above ground is anchored by hard facts below. The memorial is physically undergirded by a subterranean documentation center that houses the historical records and life stories of the victims, marrying the abstract void with concrete history. This synthesis of dissent, data, and the void was later applied to the 9/11 memorial in New York City. Facing a massive, gaping excavation at Ground Zero, designers Michael Arad and Peter Walker had to articulate the loss of nearly 3,000 lives while navigating 2 enormous geometric holes in the street grid. Their design, reflecting absence, utilizes the exact footprints of the former Twin Towers. Sheets of water fall 35 feet down the dark walls of the footprints, pooling at the bottom before cascading down again into a secondary, unreplenishable dark abyss at the very center of the volume. Yet this deep articulation of absence is integrated seamlessly into the living city. The voids are surrounded by a dense, living canopy of hundreds of swamp-white oak trees, and the names of the dead are brought up to street level. The design accommodates grief without paralyzing the economic and civic life required to rebuild. Contemporary architects no longer try to fix history by building an impenetrable stone pedestal over the site of a tragedy. Instead, they engineer carefully structured absences, inviting us to step downward, walk inside the exact shape of what was lost, and carry the memory back up to the surface ourselves.